Thank you very much, Dr. Justin. Thank you for allowing me to come to you in this way and for understanding my relatively enfeebled condition. You can probably hear in my voice, I'm not entirely well, but I'm feeling much, much better. I want to thank also Dr. Scully for agreeing to ask the questions later. He and I were both undergraduate students at Georgetown in the turbulent years of the 1960s. I hope he will remember that and go a little easy on me tonight in questions. I must say that I feel somewhat inadequate to this task. When I read that I would be followed on the program by 4 Nobel Prize winners and Dr. Volkoff, the head of the National Institute for Drug Abuse, with whom I work on trying to reduce the problem of prescription drug abuse, especially among younger people, where it is now killing more people than heroin and cocaine abuse combined. I congratulate you in having all these fine people here, and I hope I can do something to add to the deliberations you will have. I was trying to think of what I have to add. What Dr. Justin said is true. I worked hard to advance the cause of mental health parity when I was president. When I was a governor and attorney general and a young lawyer, I supported my state's mental health system, especially the community mental health centers, which I think need more funding today and more support. Sadly, when I was a child, I lived in a family that had both substance abuse and mental health issues. I hope this is not politically incorrect to say, but you were so nice when Hillary's name was mentioned. She went back to Washington earlier today, but before she did, I was laughing about the fact that we started going out a little over 42 years ago, and we will soon celebrate our 38th wedding anniversary. And this morning we were having one of the funniest conversations in that whole 40-year history. And she looked at me and she said, honestly, I think you're still crazy, and I hope you get some help tonight. So, anybody who wants to email me any suggestions for improving my mental acuity and stability, I will be glad to have it. Let me say a few things seriously. And I want to put on my glasses because I'm fascinated by the challenges you face, by the work you do, by the good you do, and by how this whole question of mental health fits into the larger tapestry of the 21st century. I spend most of my time now in a foundation whose main function is to take a problem of some significance and figure out how to deal with it more rapidly, more effectively, and whenever possible in a less costly manner. It's been an immensely rewarding thing, and I have learned a great deal. It's made me optimistic about the future. The fact that we live in such an age of discovery has made me optimistic about the future. Just think of all the planets that have been identified just in the last 2 years outside our solar system that appear to be far enough away from their suns and dense enough in mass that they might be able to support human life. I'd like to be 20 again. Maybe I'd live long enough to see whether we're here alone in the universe. Think of all the things that have come out of all the human genome research. We have learned so much about the genetic variances that cause breast cancer. We're getting close on Parkinson's. We've made gains on Alzheimer's. I was down at the St. Jude's Children's Hospital the other day looking at 2 children who had the same kind of brain cancer, but who got different treatments because of genetic variances that they can now test for. The doctor said to me, you know, when you sequence the human genome, it cost us $3 billion. I did these tests for $5,000. In a couple of years, they'll be down to $500. I know all this will have implications for mental health as well. And as I'll say again, if given the chance over and over, it means that we have to continue the quest. And that means we can tolerate no discrimination based on the genetic information that we can discover. The world we live in is the most interdependent time in human history. If you look at all the scientific research that's being done on a multinational basis, the International Space Station was virtually the poster child for it. But there were many nations involved in the sequencing of the human genome. We are interdependent in so many ways that I can see looking at you on the screen here. I see people from all over the world. America has grown ever more diverse. You are meeting in one of our most diverse cities that had its first Chinese-American mayor. And we have, I think, delegates there who come from many other countries. You represent the upside of global interdependence. But there are three profound downsides to it that lead to a fourth, or that are, I think, all rooted in a fourth. The first is there is too much inequality. We all are willing to tolerate in any kind of market system, any kind of system that rewards talent, that rewards hard work, that rewards years of preparation, a certain amount of income inequality, but if it's too great, it operates as an unbelievable constraint on growth and social progress. You can't expand the circle of consumers. You can't really guarantee equal health outcomes. And there is way too much inequality in the world today. Inequality in access to jobs, in earning incomes, and access to health and education. The second thing is that the world has too much instability. We're all willing to tolerate a little instability. Part of the creative process is being able to fail as well as succeed. But we know that if there's too much instability, it's just as if the world were totally static, because people are afraid to take any chances. They're afraid to make any moves. And this whole system is in danger of shutting down. That's what happened because the global financial crisis spread across the world so fast and scared people to death. So there is too much instability. You see it in the face of severe weather events. You see it in the face of agricultural droughts. You see it in the face of political upheaval in countries and ethnic and religious conflicts, and of course in the vulnerability to terror across national lines. And finally, the world we live in is not sustainable because of the way we produce and consume energy. First, we know that global warming is real, that it's caused by human activity. We know we just crossed the real threshold. There are 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's the first time in the existence of human beings on the planet that it has been that high. We know that the rise in carbon penetration is enormous. We also know that there are non-carbon greenhouse gases that are warming the planet even faster, even though their total volume is smaller. Methane from agriculture and urban land dumps, and releases from oil and gas wells. Black carbon from burning charcoal and wood and stoves, and hydrofluorocarbons, mostly from room air conditioners, largely in China and India, but there are a lot of HFCs still released in America as well. And finally, underneath all that, we know that the world has a lot of unresolved identity questions. We've all been thrown together. Different cultures, different races, different sexual orientations, different political feelings. The bounds of community have to be enlarged, but many people have not developed the personal comfort level to feel at home with their own identity and at home in a larger community of people who are radically different from them. You see it in the violence taken out against the wonderful young Pakistani girl who was shot because she wanted to go to school. You see it in the tragedy of the young Indian girl raped and murdered. You see it in the heartbreaking case of the young Afghani woman who was first in her high school class, wanted to go on to be a doctor. Her parents arranged a marriage for her with a man who said she had to stop going to school because if she went outside the house, the influences on her would be terrible. And so she went up on top of her father's house, jumped off of the house, and tried to kill herself. She succeeded in breaking her back. And the gender court in Afghanistan remarkably dissolved the marriage contract. I only hope she'll be well enough to come to the West somewhere and get the education she deserves. But these identity questions are also present in the upheaval in Syria, where to us we see what the Assad government has done, how many hundreds of thousands of refugees have been created, how many innocents have been killed. But inside the country, they're trying to figure out, when this is over, will there be minority rights as well as majority rule? Will the Sunni, the Shia, will the Christians, will the Alawites, will everybody have a home? Many of you see some manifestation of one or all of these problems every single day. Somebody burdened with poverty, somebody burdened with not being able to find a job, somebody who's had a dead-end life because they don't have education and skills, somebody who was wrecked in a financial crisis and never got over it. And if you know anybody that lives along the coastlines around Sandy, you've seen people who've been hurt by climate change, because that is dramatically increasing the number and severity of extreme weather events. I spend a lot of my time trying to figure out how to reduce these negative forces and increase the positive ones, hoping to create a wholesome and healthy environment within which children can grow and prosper and their parents and grandparents can live in peace. I find that doing this work in poor countries and wealthy countries involves fundamentally different strategies. And for those of you who worked in both, you can probably attest to that. In poor countries, they need to build systems that most of us in wealthy countries take for granted. For example, this is amazing. I'm talking to you by satellite. And I can tell by your response that my voice is delayed a couple of seconds, but otherwise I'm getting through. You would be amazed if the satellite failed, if the lights went out, if the sound went out, if the air conditioning didn't work. If you get really bored by what I'm talking about, you can get up and go to the restroom or get a glass of water. I've spent a great deal of my life in places where people can't take any of that for granted, where I try to get farmers and fishermen a fair share of their crop or produce prices, or we try to help people get seed or fertilizer, or we just try to deliver the most basic medicines that will stop children from dying from waterborne diseases to remote poor areas. They need systems. In wealthy countries, we have systems. That's how you got in your chairs and I got in mine. We couldn't have been doing everything wrong or we wouldn't all be here. But at some point, all systems become more interested in preserving their present distribution of influence and control instead of advancing the purpose for which they were established, if it required some painful change. More interested in preserving the present than preserving the future, but creating a future. And that's why what we have to do in America and what other countries have to do is to be willing to change all these systems to create the future again, to create a wider circle of opportunity, a wider circle of shared citizenship, a wider circle of genuine community. And whenever I'm working in a place, that's what I think about. For example, in America, our number one public health problem right now is childhood obesity. And when I started, I realized that this was a direct function of our ability to produce enormous amounts of food, even though there's still a large number of Americans who are food insecure because we have too much inequality. And I learned that for any number of reasons, we have people who are just on the other side of poverty, consuming too many calories from unhealthy carbohydrates and sugar, including, when we started, young school children who were getting as many as 50% of their daily calories just from the drinks they consumed in schools, just from the drinks. So I decided to, since I'm not in office and I have no power, I could just talk to people. I decided that it was inherently unreasonable to believe that the soft drink companies and the juice companies, because keep in mind there's an awful lot of sugar in those full juice drinks, I thought it was inherently unreasonable to believe that they really wanted all the school kids in America to become seriously diabetic in their 20s and have amputations in their 30s and not be able to afford soft drinks. I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe they were that venal, and I didn't believe they were that short-sighted. So I met with them, we talked about it, and I asked them to figure out a way to make money with a radically different business plan. Same way we lowered the price of AIDS drugs, by the way. And working together, they came up with a plan to get rid of all the full sugar soft drinks, all the full size